Well, there isn't enough news. I mean, there's just no news at all these days. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do, Bradford. It's so boring out there. There's nothing to report on.
Mhm.
So, have you been glued to your various news channels and stock charting things over the last couple of 3 days as the news has just been every which way?
Yeah, certainly Tesla's been up and down. I warned about a month ago that J Pow was acting like a tenured professor, and I actually got a lot of pushback on that over on X. Um, and people were saying, well, he wasn't really warning us, or I feel like J Powell warned us and was kind of like trying to tell Trump that he's the boss and Trump can't get rid of him and
Yeah,
all this
right.
stuff, like a tenured professor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Professor that has tenure, you can't get rid of him, allegedly. Um, so I was a little surprised to see the market reaction to J Powell. Um, but I think I think maybe some people overestimate uh, rates as far as the investing process. Um, because when I'm looking at things, I'm looking at bonds, cash, the yield on that versus stocks, and I just find many stocks to be a lot more appealing than what bonds or cash can do.
Yeah. So do you think any of that reaction was basically kind of an excuse to sell after a massive run up?
Yeah, I do feel like it was an excuse. Is a bit of a hair trigger, and I'm guessing there's some people who were buying some of these stocks on momentum and didn't really um, understand why Tesla was going up or why some other stocks were doing well, and were just buying them because they were going up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I said this publicly or if I said it on the show, but it's like Tesla stock is going up because Tesla stock is going up.
Right, exactly.
That was kind of the vibe last week.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. Obviously, people have talked about, of course, the shorts and the some kind of compression problem and all these kinds of things with
Mm.
the options and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
But
um,
there's some real reasons why it was going up. And what I was talking about last week was that V13 is the real deal.
yeah.
Um,
So tell us. I
yeah,
know you've got it on two vehicles. I'm sure you've
yeah.
tested it through 712 roundabouts. Uh, so let us know what you're thinking right now.
Yeah, I've tested it a lot. Not quite as much as I would have liked. And there's a reason for that. I'll get to it. Um, yeah, so I tested it through many roundabouts. I've probably done at least 50 roundabouts. Not all unique, but a lot of them. And it's extremely smooth. It's even smoother than version 12. It's more like a chauffeur. There's some errors that it's gotten rid of. Um, so I'm very impressed with it. I also drove it into downtown Indy and back. There were some issues it had around choosing lanes. Indy has these bus lanes that are painted with like a hard red paint, and the car needed to turn left um, at a intersection ahead. It couldn't see the intersection, but it wanted to get into left lane so it could turn left. Um, so it was getting into the bus lane, and um, it's just not allowed. Be the kind of the jerk thing to do. But once it could see the intersection, then it w went into
Oh,
the dedicated left turn lane. But I had to like keep it from going in there. I notice it's clipping the median on left turns where you have this little dovetail that goes up to the median and the car will kind of go over the dovetail, the concrete.
See.
So that's something version 12 would do, I think, in earlier versions of 12,
Yeah.
Tesla had fixed. And that came back.
Wow.
Um, but people are seeing some impressive things. I didn't install mine in the right order, so I can't start mine where it has to reverse to start. But many people can, where it has to back up in order to start the route. It can do that now. It's finding parking spots. Not always the best parking job, so sometimes it'll park perfectly between two spots. Sometimes it'll back up perfectly into one spot.
Hmm.
But
Oh.
it's doing it, it's attempting it. It's parallel parking on the street. Um, and there are very long stretches where I'm not correcting it whatsoever. I've had no safety critical interventions where I'm disengaging to prevent an accident in like a half second. But I do have a big caveat to that.
A big caveat, eh?
And this will sound bizarre, but I did get in an accident while I was on version 13.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't Tesla's fault. I got rear-ended. Um, and the Tesla came to a stop perfectly. So I was on the highway. There was stop traffic ahead. The Tesla started to brake, and this increasingly braked as it needed to. Toward the very end, it did a hard brake from a speed of less than 10 miles an hour to zero. I don't know if it's that last part, but the car that was behind me, and I reviewed the video footage because Teslas have 8 cameras
Right.
and they're constantly recording. And the person behind me was trailing at a half-second interval,
Half
which
second.
is which is like something you should not be doing. I don't
No.
think it's quite tailgating, but it's very close to tailgating. So they didn't have
Right.
enough time to brake appropriately. Um, so they rear-ended me. My car came to a stop and it had about 4 feet in front of us so that if I got hit, I didn't chain react into the car in front of
Mm-hmm.
me.
Hmm.
And what's funny is there were 4 cars behind me, including the one that hit me, that rear-ended someone in front of them.
Oh, really? Oh.
So everybody was not following
Oh.
at an appropriate distance.
Oh.
So the lesson for me is multiple fold. I do think Tesla might be able to improve their braking lights. There are some regulations around, like, I think there used to be these cars, and I'm sorry, this story is kind of long.
It's all right. It's good.
There used to be these cars with like flashing lights where as soon as the person would touch the brakes,
Mm.
the red lights would like go all crazy. And they're kind of annoying, right? And you kind of learn to ignore them, or you try to. So you're not allowed to do that. So anytime the brakes are pressed, you can't just like have the car go like this. But I think Tesla could do a few things. One, if they sense trouble on the highway, maybe it could flash the hazard lights.
Mm. Mhm.
Maybe if it's doing a hard braking, whether it's any time in the braking curve, it could quickly flash the lights just as a one-time deal. Um, which I wouldn't have helped in my situation. Um, so I think those are a couple of things where I might change my behavior is I don't want to be constantly monitoring people behind me.
Right.
I'm
Right.
focused on the road in front of me. Um, so I was in hurry mode. I was in the fast lane. We were trailing at what I felt was an appropriate distance. Um, but what I would maybe do differently is be in standard mode,
Mm.
where generally it's in the middle lanes, or in chill mode where you're toward the right. And
Hmm.
I just think that's like the safer choice where I'm not dependent on what the people behind me are doing or
For
not doing.
aggressive people. Yes.
Yeah.
who are trailing you at a half second.
The human drivers.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I've wondered and I've never gone to the trouble to figure it out or ask anybody when you regen brake, when the car brakes, it's when it's in FSD and it does it itself, it slows
Mhm.
down using only regen. Do the brake lights come on?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay,
Yeah,
that's
they do.
interesting to know. I
Yeah.
never knew that.
And the reason why I never disengaged was I realized that there's a lot of people who disengage FSD when they think it's they're a little concerned it's not going to break in time.
All right.
And this wasn't the case. Like it was breaking the whole time. And I've never heard of a case where the Tesla rear ends a car in front of them.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. So what
Right.
I've just decided to do is just kind of trust it,
Hmm.
and that's what I did, and it did the perfect thing. It didn't, and it's kind of a dangerous situation. So in this spot, um, the my shoulder went away, and on the right side of me, there was a semi truck.
Okay.
So there really wasn't a place to bail left or right. So if I tried to do that, that would have been bad. So I came away very impressed with the system. Um, yeah, so I'm really impressed. I got a little repairs to the X, which set me back a little bit on my testing time and all that. But I've been very impressed with version 13. And it just speaks to Tesla safety. So if you check out my account, I think it's still a pinned post, but it got like 3.7 million views. um, where I show the videos, I show the damage to
Oh,
the
okay.
other car. Basically, my car had a dent. I got rid of that picture because had our license plate on it, but
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but otherwise, yeah, that's where you can check it out.
So you got a lot of views. Boy, I need just one of those. Just one of those. I'm sitting here trying to get monetized, and
Just get
I
into an accident.
just get into an accident. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for that one. All right, so let's get back to the stock then, because everybody's very concerned. I mean, come on now. We actually, I think it was AJ pointed out, we went back 2 days.
Mhm.
So our big loss it took us back to Monday's low for the day. So it wasn't really very significant in terms of unless people bought at 490 or something, 489, whatever it turned out to be the high. So do you have thoughts about where we go from here? Are we going to have a Christmas rally still that's going to be taking us back up to S&P all-time highs and dragging Tesla along with it? Or do you think the Fed thing will cool everybody's jets for the next 2 weeks?
It does have the potential to cool the vibe because I think people are again a little overly focused on the Fed. It was a tailwind that people were looking forward to, but in my mind, it wasn't like the most important tailwind. I do want to people draw people's attention to a video that AJ did. I don't know if it's in his subscriber area, but basically he shows how Tesla did in relation to different macro events, where he plots it with the S&P 500 and he changes the scale so they can be on the same graph together, where Tesla isn't here and the
Right,
S&P
right, right,
500
right.
here. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I watched
Um,
that. I watched that one as well.
Yeah, because I do think there is a macro factor to many stocks.
Of course.
And we saw a lot of things that went down together, like even Bitcoin, who people say is not correlated. It was correlated.
That's correct. Yes.
The
Yeah,
time you want it to be uncorrelated, it was correlated.
yeah, and I mean, you know that I report on these numbers every single day, twice, morning and night. Plus, I look during the day. And Tesla, I would say, I'm just going to pull a number right out of my hat. I guess that's not like this. That would be like this. Anyway, I'm going to pull this number right out of something. I'm going to say that at least about 70% of the time, Tesla is absolutely correlated to the NASDAQ,
Mhm.
or to the Cathie Woods. You may have heard me talk about this before.
Yeah.
The Cathie Woods, because they are disruptive and somewhat dependent upon interest rates. I've seen
Mhm.
lots of periods where the Cathie Wood stocks, they all kind of move together, and not just her ETFs, but the ones that she's invested in, they kind of all move together. And then the Tesla would be moving it the same as the Cathie Woods. And then it would break away and it would follow the Tesla for 3 or 4 weeks, or I mean Tesla, the macro for 3 or 4 weeks. And then
Mhm.
the last couple of weeks, it hasn't been following anything until the Fed. Up until when the Fed came out with it wasn't following the macro, it wasn't following Cathie Woods, it was on its own trail.
Mhm. So I'll share a little story of a failure we had. So
Okay.
um,
An
we trimmed
accident and a
back.
failure in the same
Yeah,
trip.
I we trimmed back on a stock we own called Lovesac, and they're a furniture company that's very efficient and has some things we like. And we trim back because it's a premium product. So a typical set decent sized sectional from them is like I don't know, like $7,000, where you can get a normal sectional for maybe like 3,500 or less.
Less, yes.
Yeah. And it's just very sturdy. It'll last forever. Like you're never going to replace it, where a typical sectional you would. Um, but anyways, we trim back on it because it's more of a premium product. That's a high-end product. If you're
Yeah,
twice what you could get at a normal store,
yeah,
that's bad. And I we trimmed back because we thought like the economy would get worse. We're kind of waiting on this recession that's never happened. And the stock's like gone up like 50%, you know, in the face of all this.
right, right.
So I think sometimes like paying attention to macro can backfire, and it hurt us with this one.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been very different about this last year, which is, I think it is being reported, but I think dramatically underreported. And Larry and I have been talking about it all year, maybe even into the previous year, is the split. It's two economies. I mean, there's two ways that we see these two economies. One is there's the two economies in terms of the sectors that are doing well, like travel and leisure, like government, like healthcare, like tech. Those are all doing well. But the other areas like housing and automotive and durable
Mhm.
and whatnot, manufacturing, small business that are doing terrible. So those are two economies. But the one that I think would apply to your situation more is that people that make over $100,000 in own assets are doing fabulously.
They're doing
Doing
great. Yeah.
okay. They're doing like on the moon
Yeah.
terrific because they made money.
And we trimmed before the election, before the huge run in the market, but I which I think helps, like the market doing real well, I think also helps that discretionary spending. And
Yeah,
we've seen like people buying Teslas with their Tesla profits.
exactly. I think it was either Powell or it might have been Powell or maybe it was somebody else the other day that even talked about the fact that the reason that this recession never happened is because the people that make over 100,000 and have assets are using some of that asset appreciation to buy
Hmm.
stuff. And
Hmm.
that, but for that, we probably would have had, the recession that everybody expected last year. Because it's massive. I mean, the numbers
Yeah.
are big in terms of 30% 2 years in a row in the stock market. I mean, it's rare, almost unheard of. So if we have 30% 2 years in a row, people say, well, how can you do it again in 2025? So people are thinking more in terms of 20%, but that would still be pretty good.
Yeah. Over a long period of time, the S&P's done about 10%.
Right.
So like 20% would be a very good year in comparison to the average year.
Yeah. So I know you've had some other activities today, but did you have a chance to follow the Trump Musk a fight with Congress that, as of the last few minutes, is not ending well. We'll see whether or not it improves overnight, whether they have another compromise of some kind. But have you been following it at all?
So when you say it's not ending well, are you saying it's not passing
It
or it
did
will
not pass.
pass?
It did not pass the House on its first effort. Two Democrats voted for it. 33 Republicans voted against it. And apparently, and again, people could put in the comments because you may know a lot more about this than I do, or maybe you do. But the reason that it failed, according to the very few things I saw, is that the Republicans were not happy with the unlimited uh, the increase in the debt ceiling, unlimited for 2 years. So that was the deal that Trump had wanted. He's always wanted to just take away the debt ceiling cap entirely. He says it makes no sense. So, so in this case, what they said was, instead of raising the debt ceiling to some number, just give us 2 years with unlimited, and then during that 2 years, we can figure out, if you want to set another debt ceiling. So what I'm hearing is that's why the 33 Republicans, or at least some of them, voted nay. My guess would be they could fix that. They could say, okay, here's the new debt ceiling, or here is a temporary debt ceiling that would get us through to April or whatever.
I'm disappointed that's their excuse. So this is supposed to be what's called a continuing resolution with or without the disaster relief.
The
And
disaster money was included.
yeah, the disaster money could have been separate, one legislator claims, but they like to tie things together to put pressure on politicians to do things. So they tie the disaster relief to this. And supposedly those two sections are about 25 pages. They're definitely less than like 50 pages.
Right.
And this whole thing was 1,500 pages.
Originally, and now it's 115. Yeah.
Ooh, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So, did they cut out a lot of the pork in the latest version?
Yeah, this new version, the pork was gone entirely, completely. There was no pork. A lot of this nonsense about changing the way that they called things, like, rapists and murderers were, attached to the criminal justice system or something. Justice system attached, instead of calling them. Anyway, a lot of that nonsense went away. A bunch of things that looked like they might have been trying to potentially help some Congress people not get charged for crimes in the future.
Yeah,
Over,
what Randy's talking about is there's something called squash, or
gosh, yeah, right.
where they were going to be allowed to squash any inquiries, or I
Yes.
might be thinking the opposite language, but um, basically they didn't want to be investigated. Um, and so that's been taken out.
That's out. Yeah. So it was a clean bill. It had a little bit of money, I think, for
It's
farmers.
interesting Congress could pass a law so that they're not investigated, but I'm guessing maybe they passed the law allowing a certain type of investigation.
Yeah, the way it was worded, I saw that particular one. It was worded that they could not investigate members of the committees if it required the disclosure of non-disclosable information that they had. So if there was stuff that was supposed to be kept secret,
Hmm.
and the only way that the investigation could go forward would be by disclosing the secret
Hmm.
stuff, then they couldn't investigate. So I'm guessing that there was a very specific couple of things that they had in mind.
In all of this, there was an idea that I really liked. So allegedly, used to be with Congress, if you amended a bill, they attached the Congress people who added that amendment, and that's no longer in these bills. And obviously, a 1,500 page bill with no time for anyone to read. Um, this isn't appropriate either, and I hope that changes, but
Well, we
I
have it.
don't expect it to change.
Oh, we have a new thing though. This is fantastic. Listen, I put this up on X today, got a lot of activity on it. You see, we have a new thing. Now we, the people in the world of X, we debate and talk about things that need to be done. Congress people are in there, senators are in there, and they're seeing what we're talking about so that they can realize what the people are
Mm.
interested in doing. Then they can write the legislation if they choose to. But the cool thing is that whatever they do, whatever kind of legislation they write, no matter how complicated it is, no matter how many hundreds of pages it is, you just throw it in Grok. And
That's right.
Grok will be happy to analyze it, numericalize it, make it really, really easy for humans to understand, and give it historical context or whatever you want Grok to do with it. And that gives the people then in the free world of X to be able to contemplate and maybe call their senator, or maybe everybody gets on it
Yeah.
together on X and makes a big stink like they did on this one. So anyway,
So
I think
yeah,
we're in a good world.
we're missing the obvious thing though that Elon entered the conversation and again through chaos and everything, and it's a it sounds like we're getting a better result than would have happened otherwise.
Or maybe a
Um,
government shutdown. Oh well.
yeah, and we've had government shutdowns before, and the society didn't end. We're okay.
Yeah. So Trump is the king of chaos, and now he's got Musk at his right hand.
Mhm.
This is it's going to be. I tell you, we really are. This next 14, 15, 16 months are going to be absolutely worth every. I mean, no matter what we have to pay to watch this, it's going to be okay because it's going to be popcorn eating time for
Yeah.
a long time.
And I know the US is different than Argentina, but Javier Milei is doing, he seems to be doing great in Argentina. They're looking at economic growth after greatly cutting down government. I'm really curious to see where that goes too.
It's very exciting and very interesting. All right, so you've driven these vehicles around. You've been driving these vehicles for months and months and months. So, are we going to have robotaxi level? I'm sorry, are we going to have robotaxi level quality by summer?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be ready for unsupervised by summer, for sure, which means, in the driver's seat.
Right.
And maybe the supervision will be irrelevant then, or the just having the person in the driver's seat might be irrelevant. We'll see how quickly they fix things like parking and where you need a driver at first.
Mhm.
Um, or when the system gives up with the red hands when
Right.
it's blinded by the sun. So if they can get rid of those things, maybe technically it wouldn't even need someone in that driver's seat, but maybe they still do that legally for now,
Right.
um, at summertime.
Okay. All right. So you're good with all that. All right. So I wanted to switch subjects somewhat abruptly. I gave about 2 weeks ago, I relisted or redid my video on how to do leaps. People got
Mm,
a big, I got a huge response on that, put it up on X2. And some people actually, I've actually gotten, believe it or not, a couple of people have said, "Thank you, Randy. I've already made money on leaps." Now,
mm,
it was never investment advice.
mm,
It was just lifetime advice. It was the way I
yeah.
do it. May
Mm,
not be the way you want to do it, and it's not. Maybe you shouldn't even be in the leaps business.
yeah.
But as much as I know something about leaps and I have my rules. You are in the same boat, only you are actually accredited. You actually have certificates and stuff. And
Mm.
your favorite thing is covered calls. And I know you did something this last week on X about covered calls. Love to have you. Do you have the Bradford 7 rules of covered calls, or what did you talk about that day?
Yeah, we definitely have some rules. So cover calls aren't necessarily like my always favorite thing. There's sometimes we definitely don't do cover calls. So we didn't sell cover calls the week of the election because we thought Trump would win. So we're talking about cover calls on Tesla.
Yeah, you didn't want the
We
call
didn't
delay.
sell, yeah, We didn't sell covered calls the week of October with the earnings report. Um, so those happened to be 2 good weeks that, not selling covered calls was really good for us. We did get stung by selling cover calls in early July when on the week of July 5th. We had that great production and delivery report. But we since made back the money. Um, so yeah, cover calls, there's all kinds of different ways people do it, but one rule I have is there are times when Tesla is a very streaky stock. And what that means is for, seemingly multiple weeks in a row, or maybe 6 out of 7 weeks, the stock just goes on a tear. And either way, generally up, but it's done that in the wrong way before. Um, and when it goes on these tears in the positive direction, um, you don't want to be short calls that are a month long or longer, because you might think you have a sufficient margin of safety on this on a monthly. And maybe it's 20%. But like Tesla can move potentially 20% in a week.
Yeah.
Um, and when it goes on these streaks, pretty easily 20% in 2 weeks. That's just my opinion, but
Yeah, yeah. So,
um,
so maybe we should back up just a little bit.
yeah,
When you buy a call,
yeah.
basically getting paid right now, money in your pocket immediately, if I understand it right. Uh,
When you sell a
oh,
call,
covered call. Did I say that?
yeah, when you're long the stock, it looks like this.
Right.
And when you short a cover call, when you short a call, it goes like this, and essentially you get paid a little bit, so that the whole chart shifts up a little bit. So you collect a premium to give up a portion of the upside.
Got it. Okay.
So that's what a cover call is. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So all right. So if you have this covered call and the stock goes up more than you're expecting it to, and it gets called away, what does that exactly mean and how does that hurt you?
Well, we don't let that happen.
Okay, all
So
right. Okay.
we generally defend against that.
I see.
So, and that's another kind of rule we have. But so yeah, what could happen is, let's say the stock started this week at 400 and you sold the 440 call. So you're selling 10% higher and it went to 445
Hmm.
by Friday at the close. So that call was in the money by $5. So when that's the case, what the person who is long the call, because you sold it, you're short the call, they're long it, they're going to exercise that call and buy the stock at $440. And the market maker might already be short the stock at 445. Or effectively that's what they can do. And um, they can just harvest the value of that call. Um, so that's what happens if you sell a call and it goes against you and you do nothing. But we don't let that happen. So, generally we would take some action to prevent that. So we would, when we have good weeks, we're gaining cash. We typically use that to buy more shares if that's what the client wants. So in the bad weeks, we lose some of those shares that we've gained.
Hmm. Mhm.
Um, so it so essentially we sacrifice some shares, a partial amount, could be 1% or two, and we use that to buy back those short calls,
Mhm.
so that we don't go into the next week selling all our stock. So we're not triggering a bunch of capital gains outside of a
Right.
retirement account.
Oh yeah.
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 And some people will do different strategies where they might roll to a higher strike in a week that's further out. And I just think generally, um, you're trying to avoid like taking a losing week. And I think like sometimes trying to avoid your losses is worse than just taking the
Just take
loss.
it. Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
So those are some of the rules. And
Yeah.
it sounds like to me that it's a little bit even more sophisticated than my leaps. My leaps, I feel like leaps are like the least sophisticated options play.
Well, you're just going with leaps, you're just going long
Yeah.
and you give yourself a lot of time.
Yeah.
Um, so it can go bad if you buy the leap and the next thing that happens is t Tesla goes down 30% and stays down for a while. And then you're instead of being down 30% on the stock, you're down 60%
100%.
on a leap.
Yeah.
Um, so, that can happen, but generally you're betting that the stock is going to go higher by more by a magnified effect and in the period of time that you're interested in, and usually that's 2 years out.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so we think the stock could be $1,000 a couple of years out. So, some leap strategies might make sense, but I think there's a different way you can play leaps. And I think I did this poll that really worried me. So I asked people, are you just long the stock? Are you using margin? Are you using leverage or options? Are you using both options and margin? And 16% said that they were using both margin and options, which is a very dangerous cocktail. Um, I know of people who have lost 8 figures having both leverage and options. But either one can really hurt you,
By themselves.
um, depending on how extreme you get. So I want to warn people to have limits because when times are good and the stock just keeps shooting up, there's people bragging about their gains or how much they have in Tesla. And there's people out there publicly saying they have 50 million in Tesla or whatever. And you're looking at that person, and you're like, well, I'm smarter than them. I've done more research or I've invested longer or whatever. Um, I should have more money than them. I know that sounds ridiculous, but we can get in this goal creep. There's a lot of people who made $1 million or more from Tesla.
Yes.
And when that happens, you're like, well, why can't I have 10 million? Why can't I have 100 million? Well, what if at some point in my life I was a billionaire? That'd be pretty cool.
Right.
So what you can end up doing is you end up taking too much risk. You put too much money in options, or you put too much in margin, and you might think there's a conservative margin amount like 33% margin or whatever, but there's a guy named Jason DeBolt who he was like 12% margin, and in 2022 he still got margin called
Yeah.
when Tesla stock went down, and that seemed like a safe amount of margin, and he still got margin called. Is
Yeah. Yeah.
very shocking.
Right.
Um,
Fortunately,
so
fortunately, I think he's made it all back.
yeah, he's made it all back, and he's ended up selling his house close to the time he got the margin call, and putting the net of everything into Tesla, and that worked great. Um, but I encourage people to have limits. Um, I think that's important, and we can all get excited and we can all get overly certain about what we think the future is going to hold and the timing of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's what can get you in trouble. Like literally, I know someone who, they lost money on options. They got margin called. They owed a bunch of taxes on the margin shares, and they owed more money to the IRS than what their accounts were worth. Like literally went from like 35 million net of margin to zero. Um, so that's something you want to avoid. And
I,
you think,
I'd like
well,
to, I'd like to think that even if I was 25 years old and if I had
yeah,
35 million, I would take 20 million of it and put it in treasuries and okay, I'll play with the rest. It's like,
that sounds boring, Randy.
I know it sounds boring, but I mean,
I'm just kidding. It's
Yeah.
funny, like Susie Orman was known. She's a personal finance person on CNBC call-in show,
Yeah.
and it was reported that she had 25 million in net worth, and 24 million was just in money markets, and because she didn't want
Yeah. Yeah.
the volatility in her account.
Yeah.
That seems
A
that
little
seems
conservative.
it
But
doesn't
then,
seem like a good money approach.
yeah, so
And
I have,
I guess what inspires me about rebellionaires and Teslanaires is like at a certain point they start thinking beyond their families.
right.
Um, and that's what I think is cool, and it's why I'm doing this work.
Sure, sure, sure. Absolutely right. All right. Well, any other last thoughts before I do the numbers and I say ta-ta to you?
Well, I should have prefaced this. So, as a stock options market maker, and when the tech bubble was bursting, I helped my firm develop their risk management systems. Um, I taught a lot of the people in the firm to be a stock options market maker.
Oh,
So I've forgotten a lot about stock options. Um, so I know my ways around, and we studied our covered call strategy pretty extensively. That doesn't mean we won't have bad weeks, but
sure.
we wouldn't be attempting it if we didn't think it was is additive to just holding the shares.
Yeah, very, very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I think I think these options again, I I made so much money in 2021 when everybody was a genius, but I made more
Mhm.
money than them in on a percentage basis. It was like 33 times my original investment. And
Nice.
you can have a year like that in when you're playing leaps, but you can have the very next year I wasn't a genius anymore. I don't know what happened.
I
And
think that happened to a lot of us in 2022.
all right, I'm going to let you go then, Bradford. As always, thank you for joining us and hang on, everybody. We'll talk about the numbers. Ta-ta for now. All right. Well, we are looking at a day when Tesla went sideways primarily. I mean, compared to what we were used to. So let's see. We had Tesla down $3.96 in the regular hours. And then in the after hours, it went down another $8.16. Boy, that's more than it was just a few minutes ago. We're down to 428, but let me go ahead and look at Robinhood because it's 516 where I am. It's actually come back a little bit from that. So we're now at 429 according to Robinhood. All right, let's go ahead and look at the rest of the market. So the Dow, after being up quite nicely, ended up only 15. The Nasdaq, which was also up quite nicely, ended up down 19.93, and the S&P, which was also up, eventually came down to $5, 5.08 for the day. The Magnificent Seven was all mixed. The Kathy Woods were all mixed. So it was kind of a mixed kind of day. And but Tesla is, I think, finding its place here in the above the old high, well above the old high, above the 420 level. We'll see if that continues to be the case. Um, Going into the triple witching tomorrow, so a lot of stuff might be happening regarding triple witching. Going into some rebalancing in the Nasdaq next week, that could be affecting things. So anyway, things to be aware of if you're planning to trade in or out. But it would look like Tesla is probably trying to find its bottom right here. Not investment advice. It can go to 320 as easily as it can go to 600. So we all know that, of course. All right, let's go ahead and look at the bonds. Bonds today were not my happiest thing to watch. It was the opposite of what I like to see. We're still sitting at 4.55 in the pre-market, up 2 basis points. I'm sorry, down 2 basis points in the pre-market, but it was up very strongly earlier today. So 4.55, this is hopefully as high as it's ever going to go. Well, I guess it was at 4.7, no, 4.57, but yeah, I'm hoping that we have hit our limit here. But with that bill not passing in Congress today, there could be some activity in bonds that would be continuing to head higher on these yields. The 2-year down 0.5 of a basis point at 4.314, and the 1 month up actually 1.3 basis points to 4.305. The oil market is looking unchanged in Texas Intermediate, but under 70 again at 69.91, and Brent still less than $3 higher than Texas Intermediate at 72.49. Natural gas up 1.4, getting back up into some bigger numbers, 3.63. Gold actually recovering a tad, not wanting to go under 2,600, 26.10, and silver continuing to resist temptation to go back over 30, sitting at 29.41. Copper up 0.18 in the pre-market, 408, right around where it's been. The dollar is not doing much in the pre-market. Very, very mixed, tending to be down just a bit, but I mean we're talking about fractions of a fraction. And in fact, right now, all unchanged at this exact moment. Bitcoin, another 4,500 down today. So 96,669. So that gets us back. I think that's a little lower than this range that it's been in. I would have to study that for a minute. So I don't want to be confident in what I'm saying there, but I think it's a little bit lower than the more recent range that it's been trading in. And then we've got the pre-market on the equities, the Dow down 109. We've got the S&P down 1775 and the NASDAQ down 95. That would be the Dow down 0.25%, the S&P down 0.29%, the NASDAQ down 0.43%. All right, so that is where the market is right now. Taking another look real quick. Well, yeah, 430. So Tesla is moving back in a positive direction again. I think it's finding its way here in this range. Doesn't mean that it won't go all the way back up to, close to 500 by the end of the year or certainly sometime in January. I have not made my final decision yet as to where I think it's going to go for end of the year or for the end of January. I'll try to do that by tomorrow. Later tonight, I've got to figure out what time is it? Later tonight, you're going to have Cern Basher back. So he'll be at 7:45. And yesterday, I guess, you might want to go back and take a look at the Jeff Lutz video that we did last night. Jeff is always very, very valuable, obviously, conversation. And if you haven't seen that already, I'll put that card right up here. Other than that, it would be lovely if you'd hit like, subscribe, and notify, and it'd be even more lovely if you would join Patreon and support the channel in that way. It's been great talking to you.